Good afternoon. I'm Bertrand Moullier. Thank you for this lovely introduction, Denitsa. Let me just compose myself. We're here to talk about the notion of partnerships, mostly international partnerships, as adaptation strategies to create sustainable businesses in a variety of screen sectors, all of which, or most of which, are represented on this panel. And we're here to see how certain forms of support from the Global Screen Fund in particular can actually help companies bridge that gap between early beginnings and tend to expose financial situations and maybe a space in which they have more brand strength and are able to draw capital from other sources. And we are very lucky to have representatives of, respectively, the animation sector, heroic sector if ever there was one, the VR and game sector, but mostly VR at this point, and then on either side of Eloise, two representatives from the embattled British film industry. So we're going to see how these people look at the notion of partnership, how they strive to create sustainable businesses in an economic climate that is not exactly supportive. And we're going to really look again at the dimension of how they've utilized the Global Screen Funds strategically and tactically to get to move towards sustainability. And I'd like to start with you, Sueann Rochester. You've been in animation for 20 years plus. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah. You had something like 12 years at Red Kite Studios up in Scotland, and then 2 years developing original IP at Access Studios as well. And you started Welshad Animation a few years ago. The company is based in Stirling, and you have several credits of television series, mostly to your company's name. Would you like to talk to us about what your vision is as the MD for this animation studio, as to how to develop partnerships, and what kind of resources, capital and otherwise, you can call on to strengthen the company's foundations?
Hi, everyone. The company is an animation studio. We make long-form family entertainment. And the company, being so young, we decided that we would set up as a service studio so that we could build a pipeline and an infrastructure and be able to have sustainable work for our team. Then, where the BFI gloriously came in was to then allow us to think about strategy for our own original IP, which is the goal, right? We want to have our own projects, and as fantastic as it is partnering with people and making their shows, we want to make our own. So the BFI gave us the business development funding, and we were able to get a consultant in LA and take on a head of development. So it was more for people than actual project development. But I think we have to keep both going. We need regular service work in order to keep bums on seats, who then develop our original projects while they're in. So ultimately, my goal is to keep the lights on, ultimately, but to have a sustainable studio that has regular work for people. Because we're a project-based industry, it's a bit like a concertina. We've either got 200 people or we've got 30. So to try and be able to retain the talent in Scotland, keep them all in our office, it's about having that continuity of work.
Animation UK, which I think represents your sector rather well, their paper for the parliamentary inquiry on the film and television production sector of last year mentioned the difficulty that animation studios in the UK have in developing original IP, but then retaining the IP which a lot of the time gets repatriated by foreign companies who finance the content in the first place. Can you talk a bit about your relationship with Warner's animation and where that led and what it's done for the company historically?
Well, with Warner, it was a service relationship as well, so it was all of their own content. So the relationship was great, really. They gave us money to make their stuff until it wasn't good anymore. When we were making Scooby-Doo, and 7 months into production, it imploded and was no more. But what that did for us as a company was realize actually we couldn't just rely on Warner Animation for our work, which we had done originally. And it was good while it lasted, but we needed to diversify and make sure that we had more partnerships and more globally as well, because everything ebbs and flows. And at the moment we're in production on 3 shows, but they're all UK based. 1 with Sky Kids and 2 with CBeebies, with some partners in the room.
Eaglet somewhere?
Yeah, Eaglet. Hi.
You met Tess from Eaglet.
Yeah. We're in production on Perry Penguins for CBeebies just now. It's an Eaglet original, and we're their service partner.
Do you want to talk a bit more about this example, about Perry Penguins, in terms of how you approach this as an international co-production with or co-licensing perhaps with the Italians, and how that's worked out so far?
Well, I mean, that's really a question for Tess. We're the service partner for them. But in order for the financing to come together, it couldn't be fully funded in the UK. So Eaglet got a commission from CBeebies, but that doesn't pay for a whole show. So it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's with Rai, co-produced with Red Monk Studios in Milan. It also has BFI production funding. Almost Screen Scotland funding, but it's a mishmash until it was enough money to make the show.
In theory, as far as the UK is concerned, with the dispositions in place to allow independent production studios to retain their rights, has that worked out for you on that project? Are you able to keep ancillary rights or foreign rights that you can license directly yourselves or find an international TV distributor for?
Please nod, Tess. Yes.
One win. Do you want to speak? Do we have a mic just?
Well, it's probably just...
Yeah, you can speak loudly.
There are some rights go with the right deal. It's basically funded with the CBeebies and Rai co-commission with support from the Global Screen Fund, which are hugely grateful really made it be able to happen in the first place, and then the tax breaks, and that's pretty much it.
So,
with Wild Child in Scotland, Red Monk in Milan, and ourselves, Eaglet in London. So those are the entities involved.
So the advantage of that foreign partnership in this case is you can rise above the CBB tariff and make something with considerably more production values?
Yeah, we are within the CBB's tariff.
Right.
But obviously they're not fully funded. So that's how they define the fantastic.
I mean, the reality is it's only had to go to Italy for money. The partnership's great. We love working with Red Monk, but if we could fully fund it and make it in the UK, we would. But it's just not. It's not a possibility.
That's an important factor. Okay. And you mentioned the service end of the company. You said earlier on that you were split into the kind of original IP development side and also a service studio. How much is the service studio acting as a cash cow, as it were, for the studio itself? How much is it enabling you to write off your development cost? With the help of GSF, of course.
Oh, yeah, but also Screen Scotland. So we have, we're so lucky to have Screen Scotland. So we can access development funding from them for TV and for film, single project and slate. So that means that we're not having to spend our own money all of the time. But the reality is the service side does pay for our own original IP. But yeah, with Screen Scotland and BFI.
So what are you working on at the moment that's kind of nearing production, perhaps, so that you've completed the finance for?
What am I allowed to talk about? Is the question. We're doing a co-production with Alt Animation in Northern Ireland and Studio Mala in Ireland on a show called Captain Onion's Buoyant Academy for Wayward Youth. That's taken me 2 years to get that out of my mouth. It's not fully financed yet, so the BFI people in here have the application in front of them right now. It's going to be amazing, and it's all going to be...
No pressure there, Denita.
But yeah, that one's going to be next. It'll be the next one that we are an actual partner on. Right.
Well, good luck with that, and we'll come back to you in a minute. Eloise Singer, you run Singer Studio and Singer Interactive, the two different companies, or?
Yeah, Singer Interactive is the subsidiary of Singer
Right.
Studios, so it's where we develop our games.
But you have an interesting kind of itinerary through the industry, because you started at Pinewood Studios, not exactly a startup, on physical production for a range of movies. Then you exec produced Billy Piper's first film as a director, Rare Beast, a few years ago, which was a critical success. And then you founded Singer in 2017, is that right?
Yeah, nearly 8 years. I feel I should get a tattoo. It's like etchings.
And you've already got a unicorn in the shape of Pirate Queen, who's the story of Shang Shi, who was this extraordinary character, the female pirate, lording it over 70,000 blokes during the Opium Wars. Do you want to talk about how right off the starting blocks you managed to push this, because you wrote, directed, and produced it, am I correct?
Yeah, I was one of the writers. Maya Bodenstein.
This cost a lot of money to even get to a prototype. So how did you envisage both the company's development and this kind of, obviously, this driver product? And what was the role of GSF? Sorry, it's 3 questions, not 1.
That's okay. All very good 3 questions, thank you. Yeah, it was interesting. I think, so we started developing The Pirate Queen as a film initially, and we were making it as a co-production between us and a Beijing-based company called Cecil Films, which isn't the UK Cecil Films. But they made The Farewell, which was nominated for the Golden Globes, and we started development. We got development funding very kindly from the BFI. And then when the pandemic struck, we realized that we didn't know how to continue developing the film. And at that time, the BFI, bless you, the BFI had some funding to develop VR prototypes. And I thought, okay, if we can't make this into a film, why don't we try and make it in VR? It'd be a really interesting way to tell a story. So I teamed up with a guy called Dr. Dave Ranyard, who used to be the head of PlayStation Studios. And we made this prototype. I didn't even know what Unreal Engine was when I first started this project. Like, that was my level of knowledge in VR. But we made this prototype, and it got accepted into Raindance Film Festival, and then won at Raindance, and we showed it to Meta. And Meta were like, this is actually very good. And we were like, thank you so much. And they were like, no, this is very good, so we'll fund it. And we were like, okay, cool. So then we went through this process of about 2 years of developing The Pirate Queen, and we attached Lucy Liu as the voice and the exec producer, and we applied to the BFI for global screen funding to be able to self-publish the game, because effectively the difficulty in the games industry is that if you sign with a publisher, which you do you, but they take between 30 and 50% of the profits of your game, and they also, more often than not, retain your IP. So what we wanted to do was be able to keep our own IP, and our agreement with Meta was that we could keep the IP, and it meant that we could retain the profits of the game so that we had the split with Meta. And we were very, very lucky that we did get global screen funding for this, and as a result, that funding then went into the publishing of our game, so it meant that we could do all of the marketing for it. It meant that we were then giving out the narrative that we believed in, rather than going to a publisher and them creating the narrative around the game to release. And it meant that we could do an awards run with it as well, so as a result we were nominated for an Emmy. And off the back of that, it now means that because we still have the IP, we can then go and expand the IP, so we can expand The Pirate Queen, we can release the podcast version of The Pirate Queen, we're developing the TV show of The Pirate Queen. And it's a really interesting model that just allows you to have a lot more ownership over the content that you're creating rather than having to give huge chunks of it away.
To be clear, because that's something that made your film colleagues almost fall off their chairs in the prep, but Meta funded this effectively 100% in terms of how far you'd got with the prototype. But you actually, it's a non-exclusive basis. You can license this to other vendors, and they're quite happy about it.
Yeah,
all on drugs up in Palo Alto.
I think at the moment the VR space is so new that it means that everyone wants to just get content out into the world. So as a result, we had the agreement with Meta. We released it on Meta. Now we just released it on HTC, so we did a licensing deal with them. We're looking at releasing it to different educational institutions as well and different platforms in that respect. So you can go wider as well than just VR and look at different mediums. We have an upcoming project called Mrs. Benz, which we're releasing at the top of next year, and that is very similar in the sense of, we have funded it and Meta are a partner on that project, and we're going to, very kindly thanks to the BFI, do an awards run with that and a marketing sort of push on that as well. And we retain the IP, so it means that then we can go and license it to different institutions and different headsets and expand it into a film, etc. So it's just it's an interesting way to look at
you
IP.
bring cash flow in the company to finance development on UVR. And is your idea to sort of have a sort of suite of formidable female VR games? I do not know who Mrs. Benz was, I must confess. She has something to do with Mercedes, surely. But
yes, it's a very
I imagine
cool
it's
story.
better than the Simone de Beauvoir game, which might be a bit tame.
It's a very cool story. It's basically about Bertha Benz, who was a woman in 1888 who stole her husband's invention and went on the world's first road trip. And that is the origin of Mercedes-Benz. And the car, so power to the women.
Something you said, by the way, on this in an interview I read somewhere, that the VR is a kind of pioneering new field, has different demographics for the very blokish kind of console and PC games. There is far more female engagement with it generally, and then, of course, the market is responding accordingly. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. I think that the games industry traditionally has very much been very male-focused, and VR, because it's such a new medium, there's a real opportunity to bring in a lot more of a diverse, not only creators, but audience. And you can see people like Meta really leaning into that and funding content that is a lot more female-skewed or less sort of male-focused, which is really exciting because it then means that the balance of creatives and the stories that are being told is a lot more equal. So in that respect, I think that's one of the beauties of new mediums, is effectively you're telling stories and it's bringing in new creators and different creators who are able to express themselves in different ways.
So you got a VR game that's releasing cash. It's helping fund the company. You've got the relationship with Meta, which you may do repeat business with them. You're also talking to other parties. And you said you were not necessarily interested in bringing in sort of corporate investment. Can you explain why?
Yeah, it makes it sound like everything's really good, which the reality of the situation is that, like all of us, there are challenges every day. But yeah, no, we chose not to take on equity investment into the company, and that's kind of an active decision. I think the reality is, and this was something that we were sort of speaking about earlier, is as soon as you have equity VCs or equity investors, then you're suddenly reliant on them and what they are dictating to you. And so often those partnerships do go south, and people are sort of frequently scrabbling to try and bail out their investors. And so we have purposely adopted this model where we can retain our own IPs and we have 100% control of the company, and we're able to go project per project, which, don't get me wrong, there are times where it's terrifying, as we all know. But on the whole, I think that it's a better method of moving forward because it means that you're in control of the company and the projects that you're working on and what you're doing, rather than having to be reliant on a VC telling you, what to do next and when they're going to exit.
Thank you. And do you have, like Wild Child, we have in animation, also a kind of service end to bring more resources into the company, or you don't have time for this? You're purely creative development studio.
Yeah, we actually don't. It's again, it's something that we looked at, and it's something that if we wanted to, we definitely could. But I think at the moment our own IPs are generating a sort of stable income, and so we don't necessarily need to look at that business model. But it's something that everyone should look at for sure. I think for us, we're basically taking our IPs and working out how we can effectively exploit the IP in different mediums, and that's what keeps us sustainable. So instead of having, I don't know, 10 different films that we're developing, we have 5 different projects that we're developing, but each one will be, there's Mrs. Benz, the film, there's Mrs. Benz, the VR, there's Mrs. Benz, the podcast. There's, with Pirate Queen, we've just announced that we're doing a graphic novel with Simon & Schuster. So it's sort of, we're expanding IPs rather than looking at sort of creating content for other people.
Thank you. To close on this, the Global Screen Fund grant is not just the amount of money, it's when it came in. Do you want to talk about us? Because it really had a very pivotal function in terms of enable you to retain the IP in what you were developing.
Yeah, for us, I mean, the fund came in just before we went to Tribeca, so it meant that we did this massive push at Tribeca and sort of announced Lucy being involved in the project, announced the project, and then as a result, everything just sort of went great. Like it really snowballed in a way that we never expected, and off the back of winning Tribeca and then sort of the press that we got from that and what picked up and then everything that happened. So it was a very pivotal time, and if we hadn't have got the funding at that point, we would have had to sign with a publisher, and we would have lost control of the IP, and we would have lost about 50% of our revenues from the game. So it was perfect timing for us.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to move us on to our film squad. Perhaps starting with you, Mike. You run Good Chaos. You may want to tell us what the bad chaos is. It might just be...
That's going to be our horror label.
Right, okay. So Good Chaos is presumably what goes on where creativity is kind of buzzing, right?
Yes, I think film production itself is just chaos anyway, isn't it? So it's a production company. I sort of set it up very softly in about 2017, and we started hiring in 2020, thanks to the Global Screen Fund, actually.
Do you want to tell us more about where that money came in, what it did for you?
Yeah, it enabled us to sort of step up in terms of our staffing levels, in terms of our infrastructure. I think for a production company to be taken seriously by funders, by talent, you have to have an infrastructure, you have to have some nous in-house, as it were. And I think that's what was really helpful to us at that pivotal stage.
Right, and it came in at the time where you had you had a significant art house hit with the movie that got Cannes, that won the Grand Prix in Cannes. So were you able to use those funds to promote the film further here? Or?
I don't think it needed any promotional help from anybody, to be honest, that film. But no, that wasn't.
Sorry, I meant Triangle of Sadness.
Triangle of Sadness. No, that wasn't what we used the funding for at all. We were the UK co-producer on that film, so we didn't have an enormous part in the creative side of that.
So the money was used to really start up the development engine.
It was the business development program, yeah.
Business development, yeah. You now have an impressive series of credits to your company's name. Recently, Santosh by Sanjay Suri, which was also, I think, the UK entry for the Oscars.
Yep.
And is a co-production with Germany, UK, France, and India. And you got the Laszlo Nemes film recently, Orphans, also, which is a co-production. You're very much orienteering towards co-production. How is the Global Screen Fund helping with that strategy? Why? go through the
We're not
interesting pains of co-production, and how is GSF?
We're not necessarily orienting to co-production, actually. We're very director-focused and project-focused, and we apply whatever funding strategy is needed for that film. In the case of Laszlo Nemes's film, which is a Hungarian language film, it's a classic European art house film, and we assembled an international co-production. We did a film this year with Netflix, we did a film with Sony, we did a film with Focus last year. So the one-stop shop mentality is also in our DNA. But co-production obviously is one way of getting a certain type of film made. We're using public funds around Europe.
Would it be fair to say as well that you're orienting more towards Europe and Asia in your development of your relationship? Is that a deliberate choice, either aesthetic or business or both?
Not specifically.
As opposed to the Anglo-American sort of...
Yes, I would say that actually. We're looking the other way rather than most UK companies which look towards the US. I think I've always been very lucky. I've had a strange career going from various... I was a journalist, I was a festival director, I was a sales agent, you know. But in all of those jobs, I was traveling extensively around the world, and I think that's my kind of sweet spot, is I'm not intimidated by the rest of the world. I love to embrace other companies and partnerships around the world. We've made films in China, India, Scandinavia, you know, Estonia, Hungary, Belgium, and I think that's one of the strengths of the company, is that we're not tied to the UK, which can be quite restrictive in what funds you can raise.
Okay. You got the kind of ad hoc relationships that partnerships that arise from this project or that project to structure a co-production. But in your case, you've also got relationships that are perhaps more established. You want to talk about the creatives?
Yes, the creatives is an alliance of 9 European production companies that started in 2020, just before COVID, actually, not specifically because of COVID. And it was actually founded in response to the then very aggressive push by platforms into the talent space across Europe. Yep. And these independent companies wanted to sort of come together to basically just kind of chat about how are we going to survive, you know. But it's become much more of a formalized relationship, actually, the 9 companies.
Sounds also like a bit of a kind of independent producers therapy group.
I think we were very conscious at the beginning that it was like a sort of, you know, coffee break where every week we would moan and whine to each other. But it's become, we have started to through a period of a few years, started to all work together very organically. Mm-hmm. We have a co-production that just got into Sundance, for example, which is led by one of our French partners, Oecourt. And now we're going to the next step. So we've hired a CEO who's going to be our boss, and looking to kind of further integrate the companies.
So how would that work? A holding company with...
we don't know yet.
Don't know it, yeah.
He's sort of exploring ways of making us effective. He's called Romain Bessy. He used to run Newen Connect, and before that, Studio Canal. So he's sort of looking at...
A lot of experience.
Developing the group.
And you also have a relationship with the co-production office, Philippe Bobert. Is that something stable where you run through?
It's project by project. We're working with him on Ruben Östlund's new film, for example.
And the relationships with directors, prominent directors like Laszlo Nemes, is that something you're looking to try and follow them through several features if you can, or is it just the nature of the project?
I don't know. I'm constantly fascinated about producer-director relationships. Not necessarily, actually. I mean, I love Laszlo Nemes. I'd love to do more things with him. And we have multiple projects being developed with the same directors. But I'm not tied to this idea that a producer has to run through a director's career.
Sure.
I think that restricts both sides.
What about
I think it's quite a European way of thinking, actually. EU way of thinking rather than a...
Can't take the boy out of Paris. Can't take the Paris out of the boy, rather. What about Ed Berger, with whom you're making that Netflix movie, The Ballad of the Small Player?
We finished that in August, and he's having great success with his previous film, Conclave, so we're waiting for him to finish his awards.
And his company
run.
has a first look deal with Netflix. Are you looking
Yes.
to surf on that together, or is it just?
No, well, Edward he's off
He's
doing
off
other
doing the
things
next thing,
after me, so, you know,
One,
I'm lucky I got in when I did.
one interesting things about this film is you managed to get Colin Farrell, who is quite busy. We've seen him a lot recently. Have you found it more difficult with the streamer boom of television series to actually get hold of A-list talent for what would coincide to A-list talent in the more art house or auteur space, or is it?
Well, the
Depending
Netflix
on
film
the
was a
strength of the
bigger
project.
film, so it's not a particularly art house film. Yes and no. I mean, I think with actors, you're always going to entice them with a great director and a great script and a great character. And Colin is always looking for interesting characters to play. You know, those big actors tend to mix it up a bit. And series have come into that mix, yes, they have. And he's done a couple of hit series. But, you know, film will always lead, I think, with those actors.
One more question for you. You were in receipt of grants from the GSF also for minority co-productions. Do you want to explain how that works?
Yeah, for example, on Orphan, which is Laszlo Nemes's
Yeah.
film, Global Screen Fund is in very brilliantly. And to be honest, working as I do with a lot of European companies, it's fantastic to have somewhere, some minority co-production fund. You can say, I can go to the Global Screen Fund. Because often it's the intention at the beginning of a project to say, I can go to my minority co-production fund and apply to that. Because previously, you know, the UK is not a great co-producer traditionally, historically. And, you know, it is hard working with the French and the Germans especially, or the Dutch, for example, who have, you know, tons of access to public funding, to be able to compete.
Well, we talked about this, and now I'm moving on to you, Alison. Alison Thompson, you run Cornerstone with your partner, Mark Gooder, who lives and works in LA. So you covered both coasts. You've got a huge amount of experience in the industry on the sales side, but not just. And I think it might be helpful in that respect to explain what Cornerstone does, because in a way you're part of the sort of the changing DNA of this business. That it would be a misnomer to describe you guys as a sales agency. You do a lot more than this. You effectively executive produce, and you've got this kind of now new triangular system to have a sort of development engine that enables you to compete for existing IP or for original ideas. Do you want to talk a bit about how that works for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think when we set up Cornerstone, I can't believe that we're going to be 10 years old next year. It's gone by in a flash. I mean, Mark came actually out of distribution and a bit of production, and I came out of sales. And I think we always felt that we wanted to look at what we were doing a bit more holistically. But we are, you know, primarily, you know, our bread and butter money comes from the sales business. But we were, you know, determined to try and build a model that would allow us to take greater control of our destiny, really. So for us, embedding ourselves more in the development and production process was a bit of a no-brainer. And we've always been very relationship-driven, and we're very fortunate in the UK to have a close relationship with Genesius Pictures, which is run by Debbie Gray. We had a film called Good Luck Julia Grand out during COVID. That relationship, which started out as she as a producer and us as sales agents, has now really developed into a really brilliant thing. I mean, Debbie's still doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the creative side and the production side, but we're working as executive producers. And as a result of this relationship, with great thanks to the Global Screen Fund, last year we set up Genstone to help develop our own material. And the idea behind Genstone was really to try and fast-track development in a fairly commercial space, in the space that I describe as this sort of feel-good crossover space. So, British movies there's a certain kind of British film that's done very, very well and batted bigger than its weight. And also has traditionally and continues to be, even though we're living in a tough world right now, to be the kind of content that really does travel well globally. So Gemstone is, as I said, it's about a year old, and hopefully, because we've been focusing, some of our material is from scratch development, but we've also been focused on second stage development, because we've seen quite a lot of material that comes towards us that we like very much indeed, but feel that it's not really ready to get packaged and greenlit and sold and out into the world. So we've been specifically focused on helping that second stage production, development, hopefully get to the greenlight stage. So if all goes well in 2025, we'll have 1 or 2 movies go into production. But alongside that, we really wanted to find a way to be fully vertically integrated. And so back in 2020, a slightly crazy time, we set up a new distribution company in Australia. And again with Genesius. So we co-own a company called Reset. And the idea behind Reset was really to partly about the distribution business, but also about we have very strong Australian connections. Mark Goodridge he's a Kiwi but spent many years in Australia. And so he's someone who not only understands the distribution model down there very well, but also has worked in production there too. And what we've been able to do with Reset is to combine releasing our own films through Reset. So in other words, rather than selling them to a third-party distributor down there, release them ourselves. And again, it's about controlling our destiny and hopefully being able to take advantage of the upside where we think it exists. And alongside our own films, we've also been picking up third-party films for distribution as well. So even though we're a boutique company, we do see ourselves as a sort of a teeny-weeny studio, if you like.
So the way it works, you've got matching funds, presumably from GSF in Gemstone. Yes. The rest being private equity. You don't have to say where it comes from. Yeah. So that means that's your development engine. You can acquire IP quite a lot upstream, which is not what sales agents tend to do when they're traditional sales agents. And you've got Debbie in charge of the kind of hands-on producing and EP and additional EP muscle between you and Mark. And then you're able, of course, to bring the sales estimates dimension and maybe advances on the value of international rights as well, or when you're trying to package a project? I mean, that might be too early. Because
yes, I mean, in terms of the Gemstone films, it's still a little early. But I mean, it's a good question, Bertrand, because of course it raises the whole question of how we're currently financing our films here in the UK at the moment. And none of us can deny it's really tough. I mean, I've been around for a long while, and I would say it's the toughest I've ever known it. But one thing I know for absolute certain is that there will always be a demand for content. And what we need to do is to find a way of rebuilding the business model for the future. And our little role in that at Cornerstone is really about thinking how to what do we do here and now about the fact that there is virtually no pre-sale market. What do we do about losing movies to our French sales agents friends who have deeper pockets than we do? And of course, we're grappling with all of this. At the moment, we are very, very reliant on equity. And we are seeing that there is equity in the marketplace, but enormously time-consuming looking for it, and I would say I probably spend more time doing that than anything else. But also I think a little plea here to the BFI and public funding. I think that relatively small sums of money could go a long way in our world. And I think if we were able to invest just a few $100,000 as MGs against films, I think that would open an enormous number of doors to us. And it's actually very low risk money because it's the money that goes in last and comes out first. But it makes the difference for us between getting a film and not getting a film to sell.
Absolutely. I'm aware I've rather undemocratically eaten into your Q&A time. I've got plenty of questions, but maybe we should ask. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask questions, now's your time. So I can't see you. Anybody? The lady in the middle.
Yeah, I think following on from what you're saying, it's also important when receiving a grant that state that there is a project and the question of when that money is unlocked. It's also really important because a lot of co-productions and funding and pre-sales will happen at a certain point, often when you deliver the film, but often film takes a long time to make, especially making animation, and unlocking grant money and the question of when you can do that is also important. I just wondered what you had to say about that.
Alison and Mike, maybe,
I think,
on this?
I mean, that's a question for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose you're right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, on Orphan, which is the Hungarian film, the GSF came in quite early, so it was a real bonus for us to be able to say the UK's in, because we also had Germany and France and Hungary. So absolutely, of course, it's essential.
Money. What I mean is, because the money's the promise, can you actually use it?
In terms
Yeah.
of cash flowing.
Absolutely.
Cash flow, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to finance the film in its entirety, really, before you can start cash flowing it, but yeah.
But the reality is changing. I mean, sometimes there are, it doesn't, that's the old model that everything has to be on finance, but often people find themselves with budget and so on.
Yes, and especially when you're dealing with multiple public funds around Europe who are very deadline-oriented. So, we were building the budget as we went along, but to have that guarantee from the Global Screen Fund was incredibly cool, actually, for the UK to come in pretty early on.
Alison, unless you want to say something, maybe another question, because I'm conscious we're running out of time. Yep, the gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Question for Alison. As a mini studio, you talked about taking on projects that you have to do more development on that aren't quite ready to go, but do you work at the other end of the scale where they're ready to go, but a gap has emerged or a little bit of this or that, and they just need something to help them get greenlit, and it's packaged, ready, absolutely developed to an inch of its life? Not that I'm dealing with a project like this at the moment, but yeah. Just out of interest, is that kind of something you're interested in, kind of seeing things over the line later in the development process?
I mean, that's actually what we do. I think it's been a long, long while since we've just waited for films to turn up on our doorstep and take them to market. So nearly all the films that we work on come to us at a certain stage in their development, and the answer is yes. And we can't help ourselves. We fall in love with certain pieces of material, even if they're quite challenging sometimes. We basically effectively operate as executive producers and try and help package and put the films together. I have to say, though, that it is so tough right now that we are becoming increasingly selective because we have to be, because there are so many boulders that you can push up a hill at the same time, really, and it is quite time-consuming and challenging.
Okay, on this mildly optimistic note, I want to thank Mike, Eloise, Alison, and Sueann. Thank you. You've been brilliant. Wish we had 2 hours.